Hello everyone. Today we're going to start our project that is using the clone tool and the healing tool. So hopefully you guys have already saved the image that I asked you to save called Edit Portrait. It's located in your Schoology folder. If you haven't done so, just go ahead and pause, save the photo, and then open it up. We're going to go to Import and Open in order to open up the photo. So we're going to go ahead, go to our photos, and we're going to select the image of the little boy in the jean jacket. This is my little cousin. It was taken on his first birthday. So we had a little first birthday party for him over in the summer, and as you can see, he was a little tired in this picture. So he's not smiling very much, but he's still a little cutie. And then what I want you guys to do before we even start editing, we're going to go ahead and duplicate the layer. So you may not remember how to do that. In order to do that, you first have to go to the three dots on the side, and those three dots are going to give you a bunch of options, and the option that we want to select is duplicate layer, and it's going to bring up the same layer. So we're going to have layer 1 and layer 0, or it'll maybe say both layer 0. The title of these layers is not important, but if you want to rename them, you're more than welcome to, but we will crop the photo. So we're going to go to the crop tool on the left side, and we're just going to drag in our little lines that show us where we're going to crop the photo. So a little thing that I am doing is making sure that my portrait is centered. I want to have enough room on both sides, on the left side and the right side. I want to make sure I'm not going over the top of the picture. I want to make sure the picture is large enough, but I'm not including any of the black background because then it's going to be a bunch of empty space. So what I am going to include is a little bit of the glasses that my uncle is wearing. And I'm going to explain why a little bit later in the video, but it's going to be part of using the stamp tool so that I can show you guys how to get rid of the background. So sometimes I will say the stamp tool. It's also known as the clone tool. So it's the same tool. So if I go back and forth with names, don't be confused. They do the same thing. So we're going to go ahead and start with blending our skin now. So I'm going to teach you guys how photographers and different people, sometimes when they edit their photos, they have some filters that they use to make their skin nice and soft, but we're going to go ahead and use the healing brush tool. So that one is the one that looks like a band-aid. So when you hold down on the healing brush tool, it's underneath the paint bucket. You can go ahead and select it, and then what I'm doing is moving the bar that lets you choose the size and the softness of the brush. So we've already kind of worked with size and softness. If you go up in size, it makes it larger. If you go down, it makes it smaller. Same thing with hardness. If you go up with the hardness, it makes it very firm around the edges, and if you go down, it softens it up and it makes it a little easier to blend. So we're going to use a softer brush. We're going to bring it down. And then with your finger, I'm going to zoom in nice and close. I'd like to be able to see the skin. So I'm going to zoom in into the skin wherever I'm going to heal. I do want to start with the little spot on his forehead that has a cut. So he had a little cut from his the day before his party. And I'm just going to take my finger and go over that area to try to get away some of that redness. As you can see, there's not a great look to the skin when I do this because he has a lot of tiny little baby hairs. So either you could keep using the healing brush tool and see if you can just zoom in better and use a smaller brush, or the other option is to hold down on the band-aid over the same area that we were just by, and the clone stamp tool will pop up. So we're going to go ahead and select that tool. It looks like a stamp. That's why I call it the stamp tool. We're going to go ahead and we're going to set the settings for that tool as well. So very similar to the healing brush tool. You can choose the size. So right now I'm set at 21. I can move it up or I can move it down depending on how big I want the brush to be. You guys could go ahead and figure out what size you think will be best for the picture that you're editing. I always tend to work smaller than bigger because it's a little bit easier to control, but that's just my preference. Everyone will develop their own preference. You can also, again, choose the hardness of the brush. So if you want to keep it at a soft edge, you can go ahead, keep the hardness low. There is something that's a little different for this project. We're going to set where it says the 3 dots, we're going to set the area that says current to say current and below. So I did that by choosing the 3 dots on the bottom. If you want to change the opacity, you can change the opacity as well. Same thing with the different size and the hardness. You can move it up or down depending on where you want to use it. So make sure you set all of these things before we start. And then once you're ready, we're actually going to be using the little object that looks like a target. So it's got a circle and it's got some lines that are like coming out through the top and bottom and the sides. And that's going to be our target, how we source the area that we're going to use the stamp tool. So you just click on the target and then you click on the skin. And then once you do that, you can go ahead just like you did with the healing brush tool and you just move your finger over the area. And then that is going to slowly start to fade the skin. It's not going to be as obvious when I get started because it's sourcing from a color that's nearby, but if I have my opacity set very low and I also have a very soft brush so that it's not so drastic. When you do it and it looks too drastic, sometimes it looks fake. So what you have to do is go back to your target and then resample some of the skin that's maybe darker, and then that way you can go back and try to even some of that out. So once you move over the skin, you find an area that you like, you can go ahead. I sometimes like to go back to my healing brush tool. That way I could work on the skin one more time and try to smooth out the edges that look kind of fake. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep working on the skin. I'm going to decide whether or not I want to work on baby hairs. It's up to you to decide which part of the skin you want to smooth. I would definitely do any of the hairs that are like hanging down from the face and go ahead and work on smoothing out all of those areas. I'm also going to get rid of some of the chocolate that I think is on his face. I'm not sure if it's chocolate or if it's beauty marks, but I'm going to use the same process to kind of smooth that over. I'm just sourcing nearby and then going over the cheek. It looks like it's chocolate because there's a lot of little marks of brown, but it could be just a bunch of beauty marks. If it is beauty marks, I would typically keep them because you don't want to change the way they look. But since I don't know if it's beauty marks or chocolate, I'm going to go ahead and smooth some of those things out. Then I'm I'm just going to move around the screen to see if there's anything else I want to work on before I work on the glasses. I'm going to go ahead, smooth some of the upper lip, and then I'm going to go ahead, once I'm ready, I could try to see, there's sometimes a little discoloration of the skin that you might want to work on. Sometimes like the light will reflect, so that I could actually tell, because I'm used to working with faces, that some of the blue is reflecting into a skin color. But I'm going to go ahead and work on the glasses part that I was talking about earlier, where I'm using the background to source and then stamp out with a little bit of a bigger brush. I'm going to source nearby the edge, and then I'm just going to brush over that white space, because that's the part of his glasses. I'm going to keep going until I get to the edge. I'm going to be very careful when I get to the edge, because that's when it starts to blend with the blue. So I'll have to keep sourcing back. And sourcing is not very hard. You just go back to the target and then you click on the area. I'm actually using my finger to click on the target on the left and then clicking on the screen where I want to source from. And then once I get to the bottom, I'm actually going to use some of the blue to fill in the blue jacket that I went over with the green. And that's going to be the end of, using my clone tool. So they're not very difficult tools, and they're not hard to get used to, but it might take a little bit of time to get adjusted to making it look realistic. And then the last thing I'm going to do for this picture is just something that I think is really easy to make a picture look nicer, and that's going to be to brighten it up. So I'm going to go to my layer modes. So we've used these before when we change the blending mode. So we're going to go to the lines with the little circles in them. And then we're going to add a clipped adjustment. So we did use this project or this tool before in a different project. So the clipped adjustment that I'm going to select is brightness and contrast. And I'm going to bring my brightness up so I could see a little bit more of the details. When you're choosing the brightness and contrast, it really is a personal choice for what you think looks best for the photo. I like to go back and forth between the two until I find what I'm looking for. You don't want to make it too bright. So in what I was just showing is what we call in photography being blown out. So being blown out is not good. It means that you let too much light in. So it's good to have a little bit of brightness so that you can see the details, but not too much so that we lose some of those things. Okay, and so when I think it looks good, I like to have a little bit lower of a contrast. I think it looks a little bit nicer. There's really just no way for me to tell you what number to put it on. It's just going to be what you think looks good for your photo. And then once I'm done, we're going to go ahead and we're going to merge visible. One thing that I learned while working in the iPad is that you can't be on a clipped adjustment when you're trying to merge visible. So what I would suggest is if you are on the clipped adjustment, which means that your top layer is highlighted blue, where it says brightness and contrast, that means you're selected on the clipped adjustment. So basically you'll just take your finger and you will, eventually you will go ahead and select either the middle layer or the bottom layer. It doesn't matter which one, as long as it's not the clipped adjustment. Because when you go into the clipped adjustment, you'll see that there is no flatten option. The flatten option is not highlighted, so we can't choose that. So we have to go to the middle one and then go ahead and flatten it. Then you guys will just save and submit just like we normally do. So good luck, and let me know if you have any questions.